Imagine holding a document that makes you a target of the most powerful empires on Earth. In the 18th century, cartographers weren't just explorers. They were witnesses to a world that was being systematically erased. Hidden deep within private vaults are maps from the 1700s that show lush forests where there should be sand, and sprawling empires that officially never existed. The ink is centuries old, but the secrets they hold are dangerous enough to rewrite every history book in your local library. We're about to look at the forbidden geography the world was forced to forget. And trust me, number 5 is the reason some archives remain locked to this very day. Number 1, the Ghost Empire of the East. Open any modern history textbook and you'll see a vast, empty void across northern Asia. They call it a wilderness, inhabited only by scattered nomadic tribes. But if you step into the restricted archives of the 1700s, the ink tells a different story. This is a map from 1706 by Guillaume de Lille, the premier geographer to the King of France. It doesn't show a wasteland. It shows Grande Tartarie, a colossal sovereign empire with its own flag, its own language, and its own sovereign borders. It spans from the Caspian Sea to the frozen shores of the Pacific. We're talking about an area larger than the Roman Empire at its peak, yet it's been completely scrubbed from the modern curriculum. The map details hundreds of fortified cities, like Chinquitalas and the legendary capital of Kambalu. These weren't tent villages, they were stone metropolises with complex infrastructure. So, how does an entire superpower, documented by the world's best cartographers, simply evaporate? The official narrative claims Tartary was just a vague regional name used by confused Europeans. That's a bit like calling the United States the West, and then claiming the government never existed. The irony is chilling. The more precise the maps became, the faster this empire started to disappear from the record. By the mid-1800s, the maps were corrected, and Tartaria was partitioned between Russia and China as if it were a ghost. But the ground remembers what the books forgot. Scattered across these former territories are thousands of star forts, massive, geometrically perfect stone bastions, structures so advanced they'd be difficult to build today, yet we're told they were built by primitive locals. The maps show us the truth. The silence tells us the motive. But as strange as a missing empire is, our next map shows something even more impossible. An island that appeared on every major maritime chart for 200 years before being violently deleted. Number 2, the island that drowned twice. In the early 1700s, if you were a Spanish captain sailing the Gulf of Mexico, your life depended on one specific piece of land, Bermeja. On maps from 1739, it's clearly marked, a solid, rocky island sitting right off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. It wasn't a rumor, it wasn't a mirage, it was a navigational landmark used by the Spanish crown for over 2 centuries to define their maritime borders. But if you look at a map today, there's nothing but 130 feet of open blue water. The official explanation is that the cartographers of the Enlightenment were simply bad at their jobs. They claim hundreds of elite explorers all hallucinated the same island in the exact same coordinates for 200 years. But there's a darker, more modern twist to this 18th century mystery. In 2009, the Mexican government sent a high-tech research vessel to find Bermeja. They used sonar, satellites, and deep-sea divers. They found absolutely nothing. Why the sudden interest? Because Bermeja sits right in the middle of a massive undersea oil reserve. If the island exists, Mexico owns the oil. If it doesn't, the United States does. Some researchers suggest the island didn't just erode. They believe it was deliberately destroyed. Think about it, an entire landmass, scrubbed from the physical world and the digital record to settle $1 billion energy dispute. It's the perfect crime. You can't claim territory that technically never existed. The maps say it was there, the satellites say it's gone, and the silence from the authorities is the loudest part of the story. But while an island can be sunk, our next map shows something that shouldn't have been discovered for another 100 years. A frozen continent that, according to the 1700s, wasn't frozen at all. Number 3, the continent that shouldn't exist. History books are very clear. Humans first spotted the coastline of Antarctica in 1820. It was described as a frozen, lifeless wasteland, and according to modern geology, it has been buried under miles of ice for at least 15 million years. At least, that's the official version of reality. But Philippe Buache, the royal geographer to the King of France, had a different story to tell in 1737. His map doesn't just show a continent that didn't exist yet. It shows Antarctica as two distinct landmasses separated by a massive deep sea channel. In the 1700s, this was dismissed as a wild, imaginary theory by a man who had clearly spent too much time in a library. But in 1958, during the International Geophysical Year, scientists used seismic sounding to finally look beneath the ice. The results were chilling. Under 2 miles of solid, prehistoric ice, the rock structure of the continent matched the Buache Map almost perfectly. How did a Frenchman in the 1730s know the exact topography of a land buried under ice since the dawn of humanity? Buache claimed he wasn't guessing. He claimed he was copying ancient Portuguese charts that have conveniently been lost to history. The irony is staggering. Science spent 200 years calling this map a fantasy, only to prove it was a terrifyingly accurate blueprint. It suggests that someone, at some point, mapped the bottom of the world when the ice wasn't there. If the maps are right, our timeline of civilization is a complete fabrication. But while Antarctica was hiding its frozen secrets, our next map was tracking a golden empire in the heart of the jungle, a city that modern maps call a myth, but 18th century kings called a target. Number 4. The Golden City of the Guianas. For centuries, explorers bled and died in the humid green hell of the Amazon. They were searching for El Dorado, the city of gold. Modern historians tell us it was a fever dream, a tragic misunderstanding of indigenous folklore. But the 18th century cartographers didn't get the memo. This is a map from 1740 by Emmanuel Bowen, the official geographer to King George II. It doesn't just hint at a legend. It explicitly marks a massive body of water in the heart of South America, Lake Parime, and right on its golden shores sits the imperial city of Manoa. On these maps, Manoa isn't a collection of huts. It's depicted as a vast, urban sprawl. The cartographers of the 1700s were obsessed with it, placing it with mathematical precision. They even mapped the rivers that fed into it, used by traders for centuries. But if you look at a satellite map of the same coordinates today, there is no lake, there is no city, there is only an endless, impenetrable canopy of trees. The scientific consensus is that the lake never existed, that every map maker for 200 years just copied the same mistake. But here's the twist. Geological surveys of the Rupes Savanna have recently found something impossible. They found a distinct, ancient shoreline of a massive dried-up lake bed. The lake was real, the maps were right. So where did the city go? Imagine an entire civilization, so wealthy it sparked a global gold rush, vanishing so completely that we now call it a fairy tale. It's the ultimate gaslighting of history. But as haunting as a lost city of gold is, our final map is the most dangerous of all, because it doesn't just show a lost place, it shows a lost power, and the reason it was banned might change how you see the world today. Number 5. The Black Stone of the North. Every map we've seen so far was a secret. This last one? It was a warning. Take a look at the maps of the Great Arctic from the early 1700s. At the absolute center of the world, where every compass on Earth converges, they didn't draw shifting ice. They drew the Rupes Nigra, a 33-mile-wide mountain of solid, black, magnetic stone, rising directly from the sea. Mercator, the man whose projection we still use for Google Maps today, swore it was real. He described 4 massive oceans rushing into a central, terrifying vortex, a literal drain for the world's tides. But as soon as modern empires began competing for the Arctic, the maps underwent a radical correction. The mountain didn't erode, it didn't melt. It was politically and geographically erased. We're told today that the North Pole is just a desolate sheet of ice floating over a deep, empty sea. Yet the irony remains. Why is the airspace over the pole so strictly regulated? Why do modern pilots still report instrument blackouts in the exact coordinates where the Rupes Nigra was once mapped? The truth is, these 18th century cartographers weren't hallucinating. They were documenting the engine of the Earth, a physical monolith so powerful it dictated the very laws of navigation. By deleting it from the maps, the powers that be ensured that no one would go looking for the source of that power. History isn't a straight line of progress, it's a strategic series of deletions. We aren't finding new things, we're just finally seeing through the ink they used to hide the truth. That's all for today. Subscribe if you love discovering the dark side of everyday life.